You sit across from her. She's stunning, intelligent, effortlessly feminine. The kind of woman you once thought only dated men with six-figure bank accounts, a sculpted jawline, and a life of luxury. And then it hits you, quietly, almost like a whisper in the back of your mind. If I had more money, she'd want me. It's a thought millions of men carry, silently. A belief carved into our culture, our ads, our music, our movies. Get rich, and she'll chase you. No money? No chance. But let me break that illusion right now. That is the oldest lie ever sold to men. Because the truth is this: women don't crave your money. They crave a man who cannot be bought. What turns her head might be wealth, but what makes her submit is presence, stillness, energy. You see, a woman may admire the man with the car and the condo, but she aches for the man who doesn't flinch when she tests him, who looks into her eyes and sees straight through the performance. A man who's not trying to buy her attention because he already owns his own self-worth. Here's the problem. Most men have spent their lives chasing what they think women want: status, flash, approval. They put their soul on hold just to impress her, and then wonder why she loses interest the moment they finally succeed. But if you're watching this, you feel it too, don't you? A deeper truth rising from the pit of your gut. You know there's something more primal, more magnetic, that no dollar sign can imitate. That's what this video is about, because there are certain things women crave, things they can't explain, things they may never say out loud. But when a man embodies them, she feels it instantly, and she doesn't walk away. She leans in. She replays your words at night. She changes without knowing why. So, in the next few minutes, I'm going to reveal 6 hidden cravings women have. The kind that bypass logic and go straight to her body, her heart, and her soul. These aren't pickup tricks. These aren't manipulation games. And they have nothing to do with how much is in your wallet. Because when you understand these, you stop trying to impress her and start becoming the man she can't ignore. Let's begin. 1. Emotional mastery. The irresistible stillness of a Stoic man. Think back to a familiar moment. She turns cold. Her words sharp, her tone distant, her gaze daring you to react. And suddenly, you find yourself off balance, explaining, defending, or getting quietly resentful. Not because you're weak, but because no one ever taught you this one truth. Women are not drawn to your reaction. They're pulled in by your stillness. Stillness doesn't mean silence out of fear. It means an unshakable presence, unmoved even by her emotional chaos. A man who masters his emotions becomes a man no woman can control. And that is what makes him magnetic. You don't need to lecture her. You don't need to prove her wrong. You don't need to win the argument. You simply stand there, solid, centered. You look her in the eyes and say nothing, not out of retreat, not out of withdrawal, but from a place of grounded, sovereign calm. Because women don't test men to destroy them. They test to see if there's something inside you they can trust. And when she sees you can't be baited, can't be triggered, can't be swayed, something in her begins to relax. Not because you dominate her, but because you've mastered yourself. You become the man who never asks to be followed, but is followed anyway. Not through force, not through charm, but through a silent authority she can feel in her bones. She'll come back again and again, not to challenge you, but to be near the energy that allows her to be soft, without fear of being unsafe. And you don't hold your composure to gain her love. You don't regulate your reactions to impress. You do it, because this is simply who you've chosen to become. When a man loses control, he becomes a boy. When he holds the frame, he becomes gravity. No one teaches you this. There's no class, no manual, only experience, failure, pain, and the hard-earned discipline to keep your spine straight when the world tries to make you kneel. A woman may betray a man with money, but she won't dare leave the man whose mind she can't bend, because emotional mastery isn't about controlling women. It's about becoming the kind of energy they surrender to, without knowing why. And when you carry that, you don't need to convince anyone of your worth. You are the worth. You don't chase validation, because your presence is the final proof. 2. The erotic mystery, when she craves what she can't understand. Emotional mastery is the foundation, but the next force, the one that makes her ache with confusion, is mystery. Not the childish kind of mystery, not pretending to be busy, not texting back late on purpose, but the kind that comes from a man who holds parts of himself the world will never access. She's used to predictable men who text back instantly, men who fit the same old patterns, men who are easy to read. She knows what they'll say next, how they'll react, even when they'll try to impress her. Then you walk in, not rushed, not eager, not trying to be liked. You don't chase, but you don't retreat either. You show up, fully present, say something that lingers in her mind, then disappear into your silence, and suddenly, her mind starts working. She fills in the silence. She starts imagining, not because you're playing games, but because there are parts of you no one has been allowed to touch. This is one of the most primal desires in female psychology. When she doesn't fully understand you, she becomes obsessed with discovering more, because women aren't drawn to what's easily known. They're magnetized by what feels untouched, undiscovered, unexplained. A man who lives with purpose, with depth, with inner worlds she doesn't yet have keys to. That's the kind of man she wants to surrender herself to, just to be let in. When you live this way, every glance becomes a question. Every moment feels unsolved. You become the walking contradiction that she can't stop trying to unravel. That's when desire is born. Because she doesn't want the obvious. She doesn't want the man who tells all. She wants to possess what the world doesn't even know exists. She starts watching you longer, asking random questions, trying to uncover something, anything. She throws little tests your way, not out of doubt, but to see if you're truly not like the rest. And you stay centered. You're not afraid of being misunderstood. You don't need to be figured out, because you're not living to be decoded. You live to fulfill the mission you were born for. And if she doesn't get it, that's fine. Your mystery isn't for everyone. It's reserved for those with the depth to see beyond the surface, and for the woman with that kind of intuition. She starts to feel something strange. Every moment with you feels like uncharted territory. She doesn't know why. But she wants to stay. She wants to listen longer, to get closer, to access those places you haven't spoken about, to enter that inner space where words don't reach. She finds herself wanting you without knowing why, not because you're seductive, but because you're not trying to seduce at all. That's exactly what makes her unable to walk away. And here's what no one told you. Mystery is not a technique. It is the natural expression of a soul that refuses to be commodified. You don't put yourself on display. You don't advertise your pain. You don't tell your life story on the first date. You let stillness speak. You let your eyes hold the tension. You let silence become the door. A door she must walk through if she wants to know what's really going on. And in a world full of men trying desperately to impress, she chooses you because you make her feel something deeper than attraction. You make her feel wonder. 3. Unshakable certainty, when she feels small before a man greater than her emotions. Mystery makes her curious, but it's your certainty that makes her surrender without resistance. Because here's a truth no one ever teaches men. Women don't fall in love with your words. They surrender to the way you stand, unshaken by their emotional storms. Most men get tossed around by a woman's waves. She shifts her mood. They shift their energy. She gets angry. They panic. She grows distant. They chase and appease. But not you. You walk into the room with the posture of a man who's been broken before and rebuilt himself. No arrogance, no forced strength, just a presence, like you were born to face life head on. You don't need to say, "I've been betrayed." She feels it in your gaze. You don't need to explain that you've lost everything and rose from the ashes. The way you sit in stillness while the world spins says it all. This is a kind of certainty that can't be bought. It's forged, not faked, earned through fire, built through silence. And when she stands in front of you, with all her complexity, her contradictions, her chaos, she realizes something. This man doesn't change just because I do. And in that moment, she feels small, not from shame, but because for the first time, she's standing before a man larger than her own emotions. You don't flinch, you don't chase, you don't crumble. You stand like a mountain. When she pushes to see if you'll bend, you don't fight back. You don't fall apart. You simply hold the frame. And that stillness makes her want to pause and reflect. Because in her world, men are reaction. But in you, she meets order. Your unshakable presence becomes the anchor for the storm she can't control. And you don't need to speak. You don't need to impress. You simply stand, without asking permission. When you're the man who isn't moved by insults, cold eyes, or mood swings, you become the gravitational center of her chaos. She won't explain why she's drawn to you. She doesn't need to understand. Because women don't fall by logic. They fall when they feel safe being small next to your strength. And a man like you don't need to hold her back. Because she won't want to leave. 4. Command over attention. The silent power that makes her melt in a world addicted to noise and notifications. A man who can give his undivided presence becomes rare. And because he's rare, he becomes unforgettable. You want to know what women truly crave? It's not your yacht, not your job title, not the way you grind and flash it online. It's how your eyes don't flinch when they're on her. It's how your gaze tells her, nothing else in this moment matters more than you. Because here's what most men don't realize. The currency of real masculinity in the modern world is attention. Not the weak, distracted kind that checks the phone every 5 seconds. Not the fake kind that flatters while thinking about what to say next. But the kind that's surgical, unbreakable, alive. A woman can feel it instantly. When you're fully present, she relaxes. She breathes deeper. She starts talking slower. Because your stillness becomes a space where she can unfold. And suddenly, she's not thinking about how she looks. She's not thinking about who else is watching. She's locked into the energy of a man who isn't distracted by the world. While most men are looking at their phones during dinner, you're studying the movement of her hands, the tone behind her words, the silence between her sentences. And that undivided attention unravels her faster than your hands ever could. Because women don't want to be looked at. They want to be seen, not for their makeup, not for their body, but for the small, sacred parts of themselves that most men are too noisy to notice. You don't need clever lines. You don't need expensive wine. You just need the ability to sit still and feel her without trying to fix her. That kind of attention is rare, and whatever is rare becomes powerful. You want to know why she remembers that late-night conversation with you, the one where you barely touched her? It's because you were fully there. You made her feel like time stopped. You gave her the kind of masculine focus that doesn't just observe, it penetrates. Not her body, her mind. And when a woman feels that, She begins to respond in ways even she doesn't understand. She starts softening. She starts craving more of your presence. She starts associating your gaze with safety, desire, and surrender. And here's the truth. Men spend thousands trying to impress. They throw money at dinners, trips, gifts, hoping it will matter. But a bottle of water, a quiet room, and your full attention will leave her trembling in ways she'll never forget. Because in a world full of men who scatter their focus, the one who can anchor it becomes the man who owns the room without raising his voice. So train this. Train your attention like a blade. Sharpen your focus. Learn to be still in a distracted world, because the man who controls his attention will soon control much more. 5. Quiet power. The strength that doesn't need to prove itself. He walks into the room, doesn't say a word, but everyone senses him. Not because he's loud, not because he's flexing, but because there's something in him that doesn't need to be seen, to be felt. This is quiet power, the rarest kind, the kind that doesn't need applause, attention, or validation, because it's already whole. You see, most men are noisy because they're still unsure. They fill the silence with stories, numbers, muscles, or expensive suits, hoping someone will look at them and say, "He matters." But a man who truly matters doesn't seek to be recognized. He knows, and that knowing, that deep, still, grounded self-certainty, is what women crave more than any external display. Because here's what no one tells you. Power that screams, repels, but power that whispers, commands. When a woman meets a man like this, she doesn't feel the need to argue. She doesn't feel the need to lead. She naturally begins to soften, not because he forced her, but because she can finally rest. She senses something ancient in him, a weight, a presence, not just physical, but spiritual. And it doesn't come from perfection. It comes from scars, scars she can't see, but she feels them when her head's on his chest. She feels the tension in his stillness, the fire beneath his calm, the restraint in his strength, because this kind of man has been through something. He's walked through betrayal, sat alone in his pain, felt the sting of failure without collapsing. He's buried pieces of himself that no longer served him. And what's left is a soul that doesn't flinch. He's the kind of man who can hold chaos without becoming chaotic, who can be surrounded by drama and still keep his heart sovereign. He doesn't post about how hard he works. He just works. He doesn't complain about how no one sees his worth, because his worth isn't for show, it's for impact. And when a woman steps into that energy, she knows she's not in the presence of a nice guy. She's in the presence of a pillar. And here's the paradox. She can scream, she can cry, she can even challenge him. But she'll always come back, because there's something in him she can't shake, something she wants to orbit, even if she doesn't fully understand why. She doesn't want to be the sun. She wants to revolve around a man who doesn't collapse under heat. And that's you. Not because you convinced her, not because you impressed her, but because you never tried to prove anything to begin with. Your silence said more than words ever could. Your absence spoke louder than another man's neediness. Your lack of reaction became the frame she longed to lean against. You didn't win her. You didn't seduce her. You became gravity. And she surrendered to the pull. So if you ever wonder, do I need to say more, do more, show more? The answer is this: no. You need to become more rooted, more still, more certain. Because the truth is, women aren't drawn to dominance. They're drawn to discipline, not to noise, but to presence. And the man who doesn't try to be the center of attention becomes the center of everything. 6. Clarity, discipline, and stillness, the foundation of the unshakable man. At this point, you're no longer like the men out there. You're not trying to impress. You're not chasing attention, women, or external validation, because what you're building isn't an image, isn't a reputation. It's substance, a man who can face anything without flinching. That's the summit, that's the state, and it can only be built upon 3 immovable pillars: clarity, discipline, stillness. This isn't strategy anymore. It's not technique. This is who you are now. No more pretending to be a strong man. You've become him. Clarity. When you know who you are, no one else can define you. You no longer ask, who do I need to be accepted? You ask, do I have the courage to be exactly who I am? The world is full of men with hollow souls because they live through others' approval. They trade freedom for compliments, honor for conformity, but not you. You know what aligns with your mission. You don't need permission. You choose. You walk. And anything that doesn't belong to the path, you leave behind. A man with clarity doesn't ask, does she like me? He asks, is she worthy of entering the world I've bled to build? Discipline. When consistency becomes your aura, you no longer act from emotion. You act from principle. You don't need motivation, inspiration, or applause. You do what's right, even when no one's watching. You keep promises, even when no one notices. And you choose the hard path because you no longer live for ease. Discipline makes you dangerous in silence, because every man says, I'm working on it. But only the disciplined turn words into reality, and she can feel it. She doesn't love you for your dreams. She loves you because she sees the structure in your presence. She senses a system within you that does not bend. Stillness, when not reacting, becomes the highest form of power. This is not passive silence. This is silence with weight, the kind of stillness that quiets an entire room. You walk in, no noise, no posturing, and people feel it. This man is not easily moved. You don't argue. You don't overpower. You simply stand, with a soul forged through fire, pain, and solitude. In your stillness, she finds what she's never known: absolute stability. You don't soothe her chaos. You don't collapse into her moods. You just stand there, unshaken, like a mountain she can lean on, but never conquer. And that's exactly why you become irreplaceable. Not because you tried to be chosen, but because you don't need to be chosen to know you're worthy. You're clear. You're disciplined. You carry stillness like an invisible sword, unseen, but always felt. And the right woman. She won't see you like she sees other men. She won't measure you by wealth or status. She'll feel your energy and know, this man doesn't need to have it all, because he is all. You don't need her to crave you, but you've become the kind of man she can't turn away from. No proving, no performing, just presence, full, rooted, real. A man who doesn't ask the world for permission to exist, because in the end, the most valuable man isn't the one who excites her for a moment. It's the one who earns her lifelong respect. It's not that you need more, it's that you must become more. Your whole life, they sold you a lie, that to be desired by women, you must be rich, that to be respected, you must show off, that to be loved, you must become someone else. But here's the truth. Women aren't drawn to your wallet. They surrender to the depth of a man who doesn't flinch when tested, who doesn't react when provoked, who doesn't need to prove anything to anyone. He simply stands there, solid as stone, still as deep water, clear as quiet fire. You don't need to be loud. You need to be real. Because you don't win in this world by running faster. You win by standing firmer, by mastering yourself while everyone else loses control, by choosing sigil, stillness in a world addicted to noise, by speaking less, doing more, and living as if every move is a vow to your future self. When you stop asking, "What do I need to do to be chosen?" and start asking, "Who is truly worthy of entering the world I've bled to build?" That's when you become a man no one can replace. And she'll feel that, not through your words, but through the energy you carry every time you enter a room. She won't kneel because you manipulated her. She'll kneel because for the first time in her life, she feels small in the presence of a man strong enough not to control her. And you don't need praise for that. You just need to live it, because the world isn't short on smooth-talking men. It's starved for men who keep their word to themselves. So if you're ready to stop performing, stop chasing, stop living by hollow expectations, and start living like an unseen force that nothing can resist, then this is not the end. This is the beginning. Subscribe now to the unshakable Stoic path, not to be inspired, but to become the source of strength others feel in silence. We'll walk this path together, quietly, deliberately, without begging, without proving, just existing as a real man.